Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our subscribers to the GovCon HR Round-Up podcast. This is our Thanksgiving edition.
Yes.
So welcome back. We had a great session last month before the election. I think we'll maybe tuck on some of the impacts of that as we get into January.
I haven't watched TV for a while. Who won that thing? I have no idea.
Come out from underneath your rock. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Young. I am the president of GovCon Pay. We are the only outsourced payroll and HR solutions provider that focuses exclusively on servicing the government contracting marketplace. As always, we're coming to you live today from the wonderful studios here in Tyson's Corner of BLC Digital Strategies, the media affiliate of our partner, Behrensweig and Leonard LLP, and with the support of our teams, and in particular our producer, Mr. Todd Castleberry. Before we get started, I also want to always recognize our sponsor from Berkshire Associates. We appreciate all their support and welcome to any of their clients and partners who may be joining us today. If you don't know, Berkshire is an HR compliance firm with expertise dating back over 50 years with a focus on affirmative action, pay equity, DEI services. So welcome to any Berkshire visitors who may be joining us today. For those who are longtime viewers of the Roundup, you may be noticing we're missing somebody today. Don't worry, Declan's partner, Seth Behrensweig, is well and traveling, but you just get the two of us today. So happy again to be with my friend and partner, Declan Leonard. Declan, why don't you introduce a little bit about the firm and yourself before we get going?
Yeah, it is weird without Seth here. You know, we usually have the three. I don't know if there's three Stooges or the three Musketeers. You all decide. I am Declan Leonard. I am managing partner here at Behrensweig Leonard. I also head up our firm's employment law practice, and we're a business law firm here in Tyson, serving frankly everywhere in the DMV as well as nationally for government contractors. We've got a very active government contracts practice, so it's great to be here again, Joe. Absolutely.
Well, today's topic is all about performance reviews. And I'm going to troll us a little bit to start here, Declan, because the title we put out, and we're putting these out, is preparing for annual review season.
It's like the 1980s call. They want their title back.
And we're like, probably a bad title since everything you read is everybody's moving away from annual reviews. So why don't we can make fun of ourselves a little bit here, but correct ourselves. And I think that's maybe a great way to kick off the conversation it is all about, it seems like, continuous feedback now from a review and from a performance evaluation and training perspective. What are you seeing there? What are some of the thoughts your clients are coming to with that as far as a strategy and things you need to think about in that environment?
Yeah, like as an employment lawyer, one of the things that I obviously advise clients on are when problems arise. And if I am only seeing an annual performance evaluation, the 1 to 5 and, is 2 good, is 3 acceptable, all of those things. And I'm trying to parse it out and say, do we have enough here to justify, this termination for performance-related reasons? That's not going to cut it in today's day and age. And so, as you noted, continuous feedback, easier said than done for clients, for companies, but continuous feedback is the norm. If you're not doing that, you're probably way behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, as even HR leadership at our firm tells, nobody in their performance review should be hearing about performance issues for the first time in their annual performance review.
Yeah, I always ask people, it's a very basic question, but when a client calls me up and says, hey, we need to let this person go, I said, are they going to be surprised? And it's a very basic question, but really it uncovers a lot, because if they are going to be surprised, if they didn't see it coming, to me, it's a failure of management. And it dovetails directly into what we're talking about here when we talk about annual reviews, because so often it's easy to kick the can down the road, sweep it under the rug or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so if your company has more of a continuous feedback process, which we're going to talk a lot about as a theme today, then I don't think you'll run into those problems that I see sometimes.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing a lot too, and what we're seeing our clients looking to implement, is starting that process and getting much better, much clearer, much more deliberate about goal setting.
Yeah.
Really specifying, the old SMART goal mentality.
Yeah.
SMART, the acronym, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? I am going to my cheat sheet just in case. And is it time bound?
Yeah.
But, setting up those goals and measuring those on much shorter time frames. Maybe it's not weekly, but at least monthly and quarterly, I think builds into that continuous feedback, which is really important.
And not letting goal setting and goal measurement be confused with position descriptions. They're very different things. Position descriptions should be reviewed, kind of regularly, but definitely a year, 2 year, 3 year, to see whether or not they're still in line with what's happening on the ground. But what you're talking about is a lot different. Goal setting, goal measurement is really an offshoot of the position description. It's really how this is working in real life. On a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So I think that's critical also for HR to understand.
Yeah, and I think we're also seeing companies get more mature and better of aligning those specific position goals and individual goals with the company goals. And how does that trickle down? For example, at our organization, the core tenet is obviously client service. So we have a company goal of certain retention amount, but our support team have weekly goals on percentage of calls that are answered, measured weekly, reported up to management monthly to hit those targets. So everybody is very in line. We're not getting together once a year and going, hey, how was our retention goal? Did we do good? And what should we need to do better? It's those building blocks that trickle down through the organization.
Let's talk a little bit about technology because, in my opinion, you have the best intentions, but if you throw out things like we're going to do continuous feedback, if you don't have the technology to make that happen throughout the year, you are going to find yourself at the end of the year saying, hey, we're doing our annual review season right now. You're going to find yourself in that boat. So talk a little bit about that. And I know with GovCon Pay, you've got, that aspect of it covered.
No, absolutely. I mean, as the folks on the call, the technology is becoming so much more a part of the HR practitioner's tool set in various areas, and it's developing in different areas. We've seen a lot of enhancement, probably foremost first in the recruiting and applicant tracking as far as technology. That's where we're seeing the easiest, the earliest application of AI in the recruiting and applicant tracking. Where obviously there's been a tremendous involvement from the performance management world as well, because people want to get away from a 5-question thing on five questions and ratings on an Excel document once a year. And as you said, if you want to have this ongoing dialogue management and the ability for people to communicate, you need tools to do that. And we are seeing more and more clients that are like, hey, I need to have those tools and ideally have them a part of the overall solution you're doing. So technology is continuing to evolve into all these areas of HR and going to continue to grow for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's timely. We've got a question here. What kind of features or tools should we be looking for when trying to select an HR software solution? And of course, that selection, and we're not here obviously to create a commercial for any particular HR software solution. It's going to depend on so many things: the number of employees you have, how you have your structure of your back office set up, things of that nature. But anything else some advice and things to look for as you're trying to select one?
Yeah, and to your point, we never do anything kind of self-serve, but I think you always want to try and have that, and most of the products in the middle market out there, having all that integrated with the other core HR. So your core HRIS, your payroll, be it your benefits, your learning management systems, being able to have those tools all in one system that can flow into compensation again is ideally what people should be looking for. Because again, at the end of the day, we're always looking to create simplicity, efficiency, flow of data. But there are situations too where there are best of breed performance management products out there that you may not get in a bundled product. And for some companies that maybe are doing some things really unique or larger, more diverse workforces, sometimes they have to go to best of breed too to get the way they need. So it really, depends on the evaluation and the needs of the clients. But there are great tools out there is the answer.
And it has changed dramatically sort of the arena of review process. Again, I mean, I've been doing this almost 30 years, and so I'm so used to getting that PDF of all the performance evaluations. Here's the 2022 one. Here's the 2023 one, and I'm just looking, and I'm getting one for each year. Now, clients are sending me, the records that are coming in from all of the the HR platform. And they're interesting because when the way I described it in the past, the way you used to do it is the company would do the write-up. There would be some back and forth a little bit in feedback, but ultimately the company would finalize it. They'd send it to the employee for their signature, which was always maddening to me because there's no reason you need to get them to sign. And of course, some employees didn't like it and wouldn't sign, and people think, well, then it's not a valid evaluation. Well, of course it is. But now, employees have the ability to go in, and I will tell you as an employment lawyer, I think it's great, but I also think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because employers, by doing this, there's way more transparency, and I'm a big fan of that, so I think it's good. But you also relinquish some control as to what shows up. And if you've got an employee who wants to jump into the portal, jump into the platform, and write in there, I think I'm being targeted for harassment stuff, you've now got that in writing. You've got to now deal with that. And so there's a lot more give and take when it comes to this, a lot more of interactive process that I think is good ultimately, but in the wrong hands could be a challenge for HR.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing, I hear from internals, like we want performance reviews to be a dialogue and a conversation. Yeah. Not an annual test. Yeah. It's not an audit.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Make it a conversation. And I think you mentioned transparency, even when you are creating performance reviews, and maybe you are having the goals and it's leading up to one bigger annual one, everybody should know what they're going to be judged on, aligned with their job description, like you said, well in advance. Yeah. You don't want somebody to get we're going through that process now. We have like certain specific, like training. Training is a big topic of employee engagement, which ties into performance and ties into retention. We have specific training goals. Like all our associates are required to do 40 hours of training. If you want to get a 3 out of 5,
easily
you do 40.
measurable.
Easy measurable. Everybody knows what it is in advance, and that's a part of their goal setting throughout the year. So that transparency and dialogue is really important.
So now we know the importance of these HR platforms and their role in the performance evaluation process. Then the question is like, who should be involved in this process? I mean, we see a question up there. You want to go through that?
Yeah, obviously we have the traditional manager, supervisor, but obviously unique to the government contracting space.
It's a unique challenge,
you have employees working off-site, under primes, with partners, their direct day-to-day manager is not an employee. Like, what are the unique situations that you see there?
It is tough. I mean, we've talked about this in one of our recent roundups where, you get the call from the prime, or if you are the prime, you get the call from the government customer that says, I want this person removed. And you're like, well, why? And maybe they fall into a protected class. It really puts the company in a bind. We're not really talking about that now. We're really just talking about, like, if you are a government contractor that has, your billable employees that are either on site or maybe working remotely, supervised by the prime, supervised by folks that are at the government agency that you're working for, what are you reviewing them for? And you're not going to get a whole lot of content, I feel, from the government client as to feedback, unless it's bad. They rarely are going to. They're not going to be filling out a whole lot of forms. So it does create a bit of a challenge.
And, going back to kind of technology and something else people to think about, because this has come up with many of our clients, is, again, not being reactionary, but being proactive is, if you're looking at software, there are some softwares out there that can enable outside third parties to also be a part of your technology platform to do that. So if you're doing 360 reviews, maybe you do want to get feedback from that person that in a traditional commercial environment wouldn't necessarily be there, but is so critical to the performance and the ongoing contract and satisfaction, of that client, being able to actually include them in that review process as well. So that's something I would recommend for people who are looking for technology platforms. See if they have that capability, that it doesn't have to be an employee who's a user in your software to be able to come in and participate in that process, because that's usually valuable feedback.
And I think it's a healthy process, actually, because what it does do is it forces, in the scenario we're talking about where the employee is sort of remote or working on site, and you really don't have a whole lot of day-to-day interaction. What it does force the company to do is it forces their project manager to be a lot more proactive in soliciting feedback from, let's just say, the powers that be, the people who are in the know, whether that's the prime or whether that's the government agency. It just forces them to be in much more, and that not only helps you evaluate your employees and their strengths and weaknesses, but any time that you're engaged in dialogue with your prime prime or your agency as the customer, that's good for business because it shows you're engaged.
Yep.
So it really does kind of force it. So I think it's actually a good process at the end of the day for government contractors.
Yeah, and as you said, we said being proactive with it, not reactive when now you're trying to deal with, I want this person removed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
What about, we touched on it a little bit, but maybe dive a little deeper in, ongoing, work of making sure as we're going through this process and we're setting goals and we're evaluating people that they're looking back, is this aligned with the actual job descriptions that we put in place, and we keeping those up to date as a part of the performance review process?
Oh,
too?
Absolutely. I mean, I see it time and time again where, somebody gets a bad review, and I'm representing a company, a government contractor. The employee gets a bad review, and you say, well, no, I mean, here it is. It's all laid out here. You didn't do X, Y, and Z. And then they go back to their position description, and they say, where in here is that really one of my core job duties? And that position description may be 5, 6, 10 years old. So I would say I don't think there's already enough on HR's plates these days. I don't think that you have to do it yearly, but I think every 2 years, perhaps you can stretch to 3 years. Take a look at those position descriptions, go through and make sure that what they are doing it actually matches. What they're doing on the ground matches what's in that piece of paper.
And we always, obviously, as a part of this process, we wish everybody's getting 4s and 5s and everybody's high performers and we're all moving along.
Yes. I rarely get calls for that.
Yeah. So I'm sure as an attorney, you never get into questions about,
I tease my clients. I'm like, you never call me when there's a promotion, Just, we got balloons going off and everything,
So the popular PIP, the performance improvement plan,
the dreaded PIP.
What are some best practices there? How should they be used? How should they not be used?
I get in trouble with my HR folks sometimes on this one. I personally, and again, it's because of experience of how I've seen them used. I think there's a place for performance improvement plans. Once again, if they're coming at the tail end of a lot of performance-related issues that have not been conveyed, that is not the effective use. I mean, you've got to have, and again, it does not have to be like a formal memo. Send somebody an email and say, hey, you really you weren't responsive to this one client, or your deliverable wasn't great. Performance improvement plans should not be checking the box prior to making a termination decision, or sometimes having already made that termination decision. This is our way to, sort of cloak it in more legitimacy. That's not going to work at all, in my opinion. And in my opinion, it usually backfires. Performance improvement plans should be used when there are very concrete performance deficiencies that you believe the employee can recover over time from and be a valued employee of the company. So I think that's where they're sometimes misused as like, oh my gosh, we didn't do a PIP on the way out the door. That's not the right way to use PIPs.
In those situations, is that typically being used in that way to overcome the lack of proper documentation of the issues beforehand? I mean, is that kind of...
I think it is. I think
it goes back to ongoing documentation and things like that. Because then they're like, well, where's the documentation? Well, let's put them on a PIP.
Yeah, and then it's like the kitchen sink approach. It's like everything they did. A year ago you did X, Y, and Z. We're throwing it in that PIP. You're right. It really is. I mean, you can still have a great performance evaluation, continuous review, all that stuff, and still use PIPs. But I do think that sometimes it is used as a resort to clean up for what was not properly done in real time in a continuous fashion over the last period of time.
And I tell you, I think that as you look at the top 7 trends in performance management these days, and I think again going back to continuous communication, I think it also goes to when you're identifying those challenges, having the tools in place for training. And mentorship programs inside the company. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about, hey, we're going to, at the end of the year, we give everybody a thumbs up or thumbs down. We let them go. We all want everybody to succeed. So I think a part of this ongoing performance management is also implementing the ongoing tools for as companies and managers and leaders to get the results from the people that you want.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
becoming so much more, the mindset of performance management is ongoing. I would say it's almost ongoing performance enhancement
Yeah.
versus performance management, of building those key tenets in for success.
Yeah, no, there's got to be, in other words, when you have one of these HR platforms where you're doing, 360 reviews and you're doing continuous feedback, it can't just be like the feedback back and forth. There's got to be concrete action items that come into play. I mean, otherwise it's all for, in my opinion, it's kind of all for naught. It's kind of like if you're just going in, the employer's going in and typing up their little recitation. The employee then goes in and says, well, no, because I didn't know I was supposed to do that and I did it perfectly, blah, blah, blah. Like it, and no one's monitoring that. If that's the notes that's coming out of it, to me, it's not very effective. It's a tree falls in the forest. I mean, somebody has to really be proactively monitoring what's going into these technology platforms, these HR platforms, and creating action items like you're talking about, the importance of training, things of that nature. That's got to be followed through. This is like the technology is not the end all and be all. It is merely a conduit to spur activity, action, hopefully in the right direction.
Yeah, to build actually a ongoing, recurring, year-long type plan. Yes, absolutely.
So we got a couple of PIP questions. What's the best approach for addressing isolated performance issues without resorting to a PIP? Yeah, I mean, this is a good one because you do not want to jump into, if you do use PIPs, by the way, you're not required to. There's nothing in the law that says you have to. And really calling something a PIP or calling it just a counseling email or anything, it's all kind of the same thing at the end of the day. But you really do want to make sure that you don't go to that well too often. If you do, you could set yourself up for, discrimination claims, what they call disparate treatment claims. I mean, if you really want to run somebody out and they had one transgression, they were late for work one day, and you throw them on a PIP, they're going to be able to show very quickly that other employees were engaged in similar or identical, perhaps even worse conduct, didn't get a PIP, therefore disparate treatment if they're a member of a protected class. So that's one of those areas where you should not go to a PIP if it's more of an isolated performance issue. PIPs are really, a lot more systemic, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, as the name we forget, it's plan.
Yeah.
It's not a punishment.
Yes.
They're not being put on a timeout.
Yeah, that's a good point. Performance improvement punishment is what they should call it.
And I think you highlighted it. I think you only want to put somebody on a PIP if you do see a pathway to them being a productive part of the organization. If nobody sees a pathway there, then there's no plan.
Yep. Yeah. So we got one more PIP question.
And then the other one is kind of just touched on, but I ask anyways for the folks who may put that in is, what is something that is PIP worthy? And
sounds like a Seinfeld episode.
Extra risk if you choose to terminate without it. So I think
I don't think you are, but like as we've been talking throughout this whole session, like yes, if you haven't done the other work, if you have not been continuous, it kind of goes back to my question, are they surprised to hear that they're being terminated? That's where maybe you do have to do a cleanup on a PIP. I still think that that's the wrong approach to go. So you can terminate without first putting somebody on a PIP. Absolutely. How should we decide what is PIP worthy? I mean, you can't do it in a vacuum. It's definitely has to be in relation to how you've acted before, because you do want consistency. You know that you create a precedent every time that you put somebody on a PIP, and that again can subject the company to disparate treatment claims for discrimination. If you're treating a member of one gender worse, they're getting a whole bunch of PIPs, or somebody of a different race, religion, national origin, age, all of those protected classes. You've got to be very cognizant of how you're using these PIPs. And by the way, that is why HR needs to be involved in this process. We talked earlier about who should be involved in the whole review process. It should not just be HR. It should definitely be boots on the ground in terms of managers, supervisors, things of that nature. But if you do not have an overarching, centralized, process that goes along with those boots on the ground, you're going to get 5 to 10 different strategies of this manager doing it this way, and that's where discrimination claims can be made out if you show disparate treatment. Yeah, providing that structure and process, which you kind of keep coming back to. Kind of another topic we had here, and I think one thing that
saying, performance is how people do performance management, how you manage and the performance and the goals of your employees is obviously a huge part of just employee engagement and culture.
Yeah.
So you see, again, looking at the trends in performance management, all you read is a lot about engagement, culture, training, because everybody's struggling to find talent, keep the right talent.
Yeah.
How do you create a culture that employees are also willing to kind of give that feedback to leadership?
Yeah.
Because I think, again, we talked about this should be a dialogue. I know our firm, we do this annual. We just did our annual employee engagement survey through a third party that, we can't see it and we get our scores. But how much have you seen that and recommend that's a part of, performance and engagement as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my job, unfortunately, as an employment lawyer, because I'm getting sometimes, I'm getting mostly the problems that you develop a certain level of cynicism over a couple of decades. So when I hear buzzwords like culture and open door policies and feedback and all that stuff, I mean, sometimes I'm a little skeptical because all of this stuff is great, but if it's not consistently implemented and adopted, it's actually going to be worse because it infuriates people, because it makes it seem like you're almost like gaslighting people. You're like, we have an open door policy, and then you realize, you really don't. And then you try to tout that. So implementation is absolutely, once again, the key. If you've invested heavily in this HR platform, but you don't train people on how to use it, and you don't use it as only a mechanism to help the process and not, again, the end of the process, you're going to have problems. You're going to have employees who are not content.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even in our employee survey that we recently did, my most favorite question in that, and it's a super important one to your point of people creating skepticism, is there's always the question, do you expect anything will change based on the outcomes of this survey?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a really good question. Before. I think it takes the temperature of the organization. Like, I trust leadership that they really look at this.
Yeah.
They're not just checking the box so maybe we can put on social media that we had a certain employee engagement score and won an award.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you get a horrible score on that, they don't think that, you have to reevaluate yourself.
You've got
you have
some
to
work
look
to
at process,
do.
Because then that's when you get involved, end up get pulled in when people are like, you say all this stuff, but nobody's delivering on it.
Yeah. No, I do think that that's right. If you don't follow through, it can really turn against you big time. Yep. So let's see. I think we have hit pretty much everything. We got 2 minutes left, so maybe we wrap up. What are we doing for December?
What are we? For December, we are doing maintaining compliance in the new year.
Oh, I was hoping it would be how to behave at holiday parties. That's always my favorite. Those are my favorite stories that I see online with all those.
10 minutes of that in. We probably should have done that now, because the holiday parties start in early December.
We have ours tomorrow night, but we're all angels, so there's no issue there.
Proactive enough in that, and like today's.
Whoa.
And like today's topic, obviously compliance is not just at year end, but we will obviously get into some of those year end topics. So, but again, thank you everyone for joining us for this month's edition. We hope you found this information helpful. We look forward to Seth being with us again back in December. As we just mentioned, our December.
We should put Seth on a pip for not showing up here.
Yes. Well, he's always on a pip. The continuous pip.
Very thin ice.
Yes. So December 19th, we will getting into maintaining compliance in the new year. And then a little tease, we did our pre-election last one, but obviously with the lay of the land a little bit more now. So probably look forward to January, diving a little deeper into maybe what things we can expect from an HR compliance regulation perspective with a new administration going in 2025. So
might have to devote more than 30 minutes to that one.
It may have to be a special January hour edition.
That's right. 60 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Hope everyone has a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving holiday. We look forward to seeing you in December. Have a great day.